Hi, everybody. I'm Scott,
And I'm Luke.
And I'm Jonathan.
and this is the No Way to Hollywood podcast. Thanks for joining us.
It is the No Way to Hollywood podcast, as you can tell from the title of this video. Could you?
And
No,
also the whole like COVID thing. Maybe there just is no Hollywood anymore. Maybe there's no more theaters. Maybe there's no more anything.
are you trying to provide a segue for us to get
I wasn't
started?
trying, Scott. I was succeeding.
But
Mm,
but Scott didn't realize that, and so it didn't segue very
I,
well.
I did my job. I segued on my two wheels all the way.
uh, well, in spite of the fact that movie theaters are still closed and very few movies are being made, we're still trying to talk about movies with you guys. So, yeah, let's see what happens. Jonathan, do you have any updates for us from Hollywood?
Yes, I can.
Hollywood.
I can do this. I can do this. Everything is still pushed back. There is no hope. It is indefinite. Tenet, Dune, everybody. No, you're not going to see it in the theater anytime soon, if ever.
Well, while that's a good approximation, Luke, I actually have an official letter from Hollywood, as you well know, Scott. They send me a letter just an address from Hollywood, giving me updates on what's happening. And I just keep
Thanks,
sending it.
Hollywood.
All I do is write them letters that say "no way," and they just don't. They don't. So I don't know what to do about that. Anyway, no, yeah, Luke's right. Basically, so on the production front, there is some hope. Various productions are rolling back into production. There's lots of crazy um, measures being taken to try to make sure that there won't be spread of COVID, that it will be as safe as it can be while they have big, high production shoots. I believe that, for instance, Mission Impossible 7 is getting back on track to shoot in Norway, I think. And some of these big movies are finally moving back into production, particularly, I think, overseas. That being said, when it comes to movies being released, that is one area where it is seemingly harder and harder to know what's going to happen. I mean, we talked about COVID when it was first happening to all of us about what we thought might go down, and we're what 5 6 months in now,
It's
and
still happening to us.
it's still happening as was feared was probably going to be likely, and much longer than that likely. Um, that being said, movies like Tenet has become, in the last 6 months, the movie Tenet has become the movie that everyone's watching to see if big movies in the theaters are going to reopen. That's kind of the thing. The idea is if Tenet is released in theaters, then there's enough markets open for them to be willing to do that. Thus, it's a sign, a coming a sign of the second coming of movies. Like it's the return of films in the normal way, as far as they can in this COVID time. That has been the idea, and Tenet has tried to release itself multiple times, and has not been successful. It's been pushed back multiple times until finally, recently, it was delayed indefinitely. So they tried July, tried later July, tried August, tried later August, and they finally said, you know what? Not yet. We don't know. We'll get there when we get there. Um,
See that made sense like 3 months ago. But good job.
Hmm.
Yeah.
so all this to say is Tenet's the big symbol of the movies returning. There are smaller movies that have been out this entire time in the like three theaters that are open in America, and they've made some money, more money than they've ever made, they've ever had a chance to make probably otherwise because they're the only movies out. Some films have been re-released. Everything from Ghostbusters to Jurassic Park and Empire Strikes Back have been re-released in theaters that are open across the country. So there's some interesting things going on there. But when it comes to brand new movies, every single one of them has been delayed, and we're getting to the point where it's delayed indefinitely, which led me to ask the question: are movies going to show up at all in 2020? Are we going to get, in fact, even 2021? Do we think we're going to see films return to the theaters? And regardless of your answer, do either of you, do any of us believe that theaters are going to make it? What do we think about that?
Well, I recently saw a thing that was like, oh, this movie theater design looks like the Galactic Senate in the prequels because it's a a screen with all these like pod shaped like um, boxes that you sit in like in a play or whatever. And so maybe there will be like this like elite thing that you can go, like you can pay for your box seat to watch this movie in your little COVID free pod or something. So
Quick question.
like horse riding. Okay, like horse riding. It used to be that everybody did it because it was the only option. Then cars came along and people were like, oh no, what about horse riding? Well, there's always going to be people who ride horses, but it's now a specialty thing. Similarly, it used to be that if you wanted to see a movie, you went to the theater, but then that died. So it's only people who really want to do the theater thing who are going to pay the $50 or whatever for their 3 friends to be able to go sit in the pod in the theater Galactic Senate thing. And so it's just going to be a different thing. It's going to be a unique experience kind of thing because everybody else is going to be watching their movies on their phones and they're going to be vertical and it's going to be sad and life is going to not be worth living anymore for filmmakers.
Wow. Quick question. These pods, did the pods have, were they truly enclosed or did it look like the design included everyone sharing the same air?
It looked like they were sharing the same air. But
then what's the point?
Like, I don't know. Like people are on airplanes.
6 feet apart.
Yeah, 6 feet apart.
Circulated air in a theater is one of the things that gets me thinking, like, I don't care what capacity you put it at. If you're going to circulate the air, you're going to be sitting there for 3 hours. Everybody that's in there, I'm sitting next to you. It might as well be.
But people like, okay, and this is part of the problem with all this, right? We still don't fully understand things. And so there's something
whoa. What you're suggesting that still today we don't fully understand things. Are you sure about that? You sure you want to make that kind of claim?
Let me be more accurate. Okay. Today, there is still at least one thing that we don't fully understand in its entirety.
I don't know. I think I understand all things.
So there's something about like the spittle, and so as long as you're 6 feet and have a mask, like you're fine. It's not really about like little particles in the air. It's more about like the actual stuff. So I don't know.
So as long as we don't go around kissing people, we'll be okay. This is This is the new mono.
This is the new derailing. Derailing. This is what I sense right now. Is a complete and utter derailing.
Okay, so my statement remains though. I think theaters will still exist as a niche, like super like those who really want to do it are going to go do the specialty thing and pay extra for it, like people who want to ride horses today, when it used to be the only way.
Like what? Going to the orchestra?
Sure.
Singing a symphony?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. People do that, man.
It's good. I've gone. It's good. It's expensive.
Okay. So now this begs the question for me. Is theater going to become high art?
Like, wait a minute. When you ask that, you just mean, are movies suddenly going to become high art because theater going so hard to get to? Or do you mean that, like, the act of theater going becomes high art?
Yeah. Like, something about, like, oh, you went to the theater, and, oh, it was actually to watch a movie, but, like, it'll have the same cachet.
Oh, no, we're going to stop. We're not going to call them movie theaters anymore. We're going to go back to calling them cinemas. If it goes that direction, right? High art, we're going to
Cinemaplex.
I went to the theater. Yes, I went to the cinema, and it was grand. It was just so grand.
and I will go to the Nickelodeon.
And I shall visit the peanut gallery.
Okay, Scott, what's your thought? Because you have not weighed in yet. Weigh in.
It's because you guys keep talking over me.
I like
right. So the peanut gallery, as I was talking.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's interesting. I feel like, to a certain extent, even before the virus hit, we had this concept of movie theaters that were trying to do anything they could to get people back in the seats. So you had Movie Pass pop up, you have AMC's A-List pop up, trying to give people a reason to get back to the theater and basically trying to make their money off of concessions, which, I mean, is pretty much how you're making money anyways as a movie theater. So to that extent, I don't know that it's necessarily going to change what it hasn't already been. I think you will have some struggle to get people into the movie theaters simply because people are afraid to be around other people now, thanks to whatever this event has been. But I don't think movie theaters are going away anytime soon. And the funnier part to me is I've actually heard stories about like drive-in movie theaters reopening after being closed for years upon years because it's really easy to go to see a movie at the drive-in when you're in your own car and secluding yourself from other people. So it's weird how on the one hand we are killing movie theaters, but it's almost like we're reverting backwards in the movie going experience in certain places.
So to set the stage a little bit too, I have read that AMC theaters basically went into debt so that they could keep themselves afloat through 2021. That was news I read. Not that I want this to happen, but let's just say that movie theaters at least aren't able really to reopen until 2022. Let's say. Does AMC die? Does Regal Cinemas die? Does every local theater, Alamo Drafthouse, name your theater chain and or local theater. Do any of them have a chance if one of the biggest theater chains, AMC, can't make ends meet after a year and a half, or really almost 2 years?
Well, I wonder if the small ones actually will be the ones that survive. Because if AMC like can't do anything for a year or two, which I think they're going to keep trying to come up with solutions. I think they are. And people like going to the grocery store, it's going to be a thing that people find a way around. Now, is it enough? Right? Like with zoos losing millions of dollars a week or whatever because it's just so expensive to run it and no one can go. Is it too expensive to run a giant, across the entire nation chain? But then is there going to be a mom and pop that it's just a passion project for whoever runs it, and they just go get another job for a while, and then, oh look, people can come back to my theater, so they just kind of reopen it? I don't know.
I mean, we already had those even before the virus hit, though. I mean, that's kind of the thing is that like there is a movie theater within the city we live in that, or the metroplex in which we live, where literally they've got a video rental store across the street and they play movies or played. I'm not sure they're currently playing, but they would play, hey, here's some of my favorite movies, usually cult classics, older movies, stuff like that. And charter, people would pay to come watch them. And it's, you already have some of those pet projects that I'm assuming we're more likely to see those come back. Um, there's a ski resort in the state we live in that is actually doing outdoor movies right now throughout the summer. I haven't heard if one of the other big kind of concert venues that normally does that around here is continuing to do that as well. But people are finding ways to exhibit movies right now.
Right, but it's also summer. So for a lot of the states, a lot of the nation, right, when it hits winter, what are you really going to be able to do? You can still do a drive-in maybe, but weather permitting, like literally, like can you see the screen very well if it's snowing? Like like we're in a certain situation where if you can only do movies in a sort of outdoor venue mostly, I don't know. It's fascinating. I'll just say this. I don't want movie theaters to go away. I like the theater going experience. I'm okay if it becomes a niche thing and I can call it the cinema and call it high art. I'm okay with that. But there is an interesting actual, like you said, Scott, movie theaters were already in trouble. right? They were already trying to figure out the best way to get people to go. It was already hard enough as it was.
Video
And
essay linked below.
Now we're in a situation where potentially for 2 years or more, maybe less, but potentially for 2 years or more, theaters won't really have audiences going if they're a traditional theater of any kind. That's how devastating is like the repercussions of something like that, even not just on the theater industry, but on the film industry, right? And there's this whole question right now with Tenet being released of, well, first of all, we're talking in largely from an American's perspective. In Europe, cases have gotten down well enough that theaters probably could reopen in a lot of the rest of the world. Europe, Asia, Asia. Asia goes back and forth, it seems, at the moment. But it's possible, for instance, that Tenet, if Warner Brothers gets to a point where they just can't handle it enough anymore, they may start releasing widely across the world where they can movies like Tenet. And it would not be in America for potentially, not at least in a theater, for a long time. In fact, it may just have to go in theaters across the world and on video on demand or something in America. Like we're in a place where distribution is shifting, and how are you going to make your money? And if you're a studio, if you're Warner Brothers, how are you going to make your money? You've just made your streaming service, your HBO Max. You could make all your new movies, Tenet, Dune, whatever, come exclusively on HBO Max, and you've got to pay an extra $20 to see it anyway. That's the kind of thing you'd maybe need to do if you're going to somehow make the same kind of money that you might make in a theater.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because there's already the case law that says, hey, production companies, distribution companies, you can't also own the theater. So if they own the streaming service, right? Like I was thinking, who's not starting their own streaming service now? Or are they trying to get in bed with Apple? Like, no way. There's no way. Peacock? No. Like, what? So yeah, they're like, okay, parent company, start our streaming service and we'll put our movies on it. But then is the government going to come in and say, we told you couldn't do that? And they'll be like, desperate times, man.
Well, but Netflix already does this.
Yeah.
Right? Like the streaming services that do exist are already in a race to try to figure out their exclusive content that they can, only they get to have on their streaming service. Now, granted, a lot of times it's TV shows, which don't necessarily have the same rules and regulations as movies and distribution. And often with Netflix, they're trying to get The Irishman into theaters so that it can get an Academy Award run and or get proper distribution, because filmmakers like Martin Scorsese and Christopher Nolan and others have a deep desire for films to be in theaters and for people to see them that way. So
that kind of gets back to the argument of the artist telling you how you should view their art, right?
Well, I mean, there is such a thing as a canvas, right? I mean, that's the thing about movies that's sort of interesting. But when you compose an image for a giant, however many feet by however many feet screen, that's a different thought process of composition and art than the people who are trying to do Quibi crap right now, where it's like, do it vertical and we'll do it whatever because we're trying to put it on a phone. It affects the medium. It affects the art you create.
It's a different.
4.3's coming back for iPads.
What's that?
What's coming back?
4.3. Yes.
Oh,
dear Lord, save us now.
It's called IMAX. I'll let it pass if it's IMAX. But I can't. It won't matter if I can't see it on an IMAX screen.
Right.
And that's the thing. Like, I don't want to go away because still to this day, I can spend thousands of dollars on a home theater system. And don't get me wrong, I have every intention to maybe one day do that. Like, I'd love to do that. But even if I make one of the best systems possible, I don't know if it can rival the picture quality, sound quality, scale, size, sense of immersion that you get when you go to a theater. Now, there's lots of people who have talked about, especially in California and other places, where they're like, going to the theater sucks. People suck. They're noisy. They're loud. They won't shut up. I've heard all sorts of different things. In my area, I have not experienced that as much. It happens occasionally, but it's very rare, actually. But again, thinking back on this idea of losing theaters, or what is the proper, like, what happens to movies if you no longer compose the image for the theater screen, right? What happens if the theaters go away for at least a while and you're not composing images for it anymore? Does anything significantly change? Will it suddenly come back? Will, and if we're talking about high art, in cinema, if high art is what gets to be put in the cinema, and it's only like The Revenant that gets put in the cinema, well then that sucks.
Well,
And
I don't think it's going to be just high art like the cinema, but I think what you will see is a movement towards all cinema becoming more high art. So even those, stupid movies that we've talked about before will somehow be put into the category of high art just because they're released in the theater.
see, I mean, Spielberg and Lucas, I think, a while ago predicted that what the theater experience was going to end up becoming was you were going to lose all your mid-budget and lower films. You were going to only have high-budget event tentpole films, and the tickets were going to end up costing way more. And it was going to be an event thing that you went and did. No longer would you have the room for movies of a mid or lower budget that would not necessarily be Avengers Endgame. That was a prediction they made years ago. Do you guys think that that's potentially the way it's going to turn out at the end of this?
I mean, that's one of the things that we've been saying about all this, right?
But
Personally, go Scott.
I was just thinking though, like if you go that direction, doesn't that lend itself to the theaters actually not existing anymore?
In what way?
Well, to a certain extent, right? You've got to have so much capacity in your theater to make halfway decent amount of money to be able to exhibit films. And what you're doing with this virus is creating an environment where you have to limit the number of people that are actually going to see films. So the big event, that ticket to the next Avengers movie, when you got a packed theater, it's not going to be as packed. It's not going to be the same event unless the theaters change how they're exhibiting movies, right? And we've talked about the idea of, the Galactic Senate movie theater where you're in your own little pod so that you can, stay 6 feet apart from everybody. And I mean, I'm not convinced that lends itself to the high art that we're talking about for a theater, right?
Well, wouldn't it make it more high art because you're not there with the rabble? The lower seats. They can't even have those with all those
But
people down there.
that's the thing about that's the thing about movies, right? Is I like the description basically that movies are an art form and a storytelling form where there's a weird combination of a very individual experience because you're sort of feel like you're in a seat watching the screen in your head, thinking, experiencing everything. You're sort of just alone thinking about it. Yet you're also in a community of people who are all like laughing at the same things or scared about the same things potentially. There's a community experience there, right? I mean, there are movies the same thing without that. I mean, they've definitely moved into streaming. We've definitely moved into a very individual thing, which is where they started, right? The idea of going to, oh, I forget what it's called. The little, oh, what's it called? It was, you had to go look into something. It was a very personal experience. You go look in, and then they would roll it around, and you could see the image that they wanted, the film that they wanted. But it was all one person at a time. You could only do it that way.
Yeah.
We've gotten more that direction because of streaming and the ability to have a phone anywhere or a TV everywhere, and you can just go and watch a movie on your own. I mean, that's how we're doing movie night right now, is virtually, right? Let's talk about it, watch it all alone, and then come talk about it again. I guess I don't like the idea of theaters going away completely. And yeah, they could become high art. Maybe they could eventually become an event thing again. I don't know, but what's the consequence, I guess?
Well, the consequence I think has to do with where production companies take their end product. right? Like if distribution no longer happens at theaters, well, then it's going to be going to the Netflix and to the Peacocks and the Amazons and the Apple Pluses and YouTube, right? Like you're going to be putting that stuff on a streaming service. And that makes me think of this great video essay about how each of those platforms aren't actually in competition with one another, which is actually creating bad stuff for us as end users. So link below for that too. That's more where I'm interested, mostly because that's where I watch all my movies, because I couldn't make it to the theater before because I got kids. Yep, that's right. I got more than one now.
Congratulations, Luke, by the by.
Yes, congrats.
I mean, to me, we're starting to get back to the great business question of how are the production companies making money, right? And if they're able to make more money using some sort of streaming service, yeah, I think theaters are gone. Like yeah, like they're just going to be gone. But at the same time, it's like it's still what the art form originally was. So you're going to have the purists out there, I assume, that are only going to want to, or it will become the, what we've talked about, this event experience that is more for the pure movie experience that people have always had. But to that end, like we've always seen trends in how movies are exhibited. I mean, 3D movies are nothing new. They just weren't made for a very, very long time, and all of a sudden have made a comeback. And
then people stop making them again because it's still not a good idea.
Right? But it's just a cycle that we go through, and I'm wondering if really the only thing we're doing is watching this virus change the cycle that we're currently in with movie making.
Well, okay, and I agree with you that like distribution, that is one aspect of this business, but movie theaters themselves are their own business, at least for now. And so, what's the local movie theater going to do? Is it just going to get torn down, or are they going to turn it into something else, or are they going to push for the Galactic Senate? Like what's the thing that the theater business is going to do?
Well, likely die, right?
I mean, I don't think so completely. I think Luke has a point. Like you do have theaters, like our Alamo Draft House near us that, it is a bit of a more event movie going experience where you sit at a table theoretically, or you sit in your area. And, we've already moved from, basically a flat ground, slightly sloped to stadium seating. And when we made that move, we lost a ton of seating space in the theaters. And now they're adding like leather reclining chairs to the theater and, slowly minimizing the number of people in the theater. I think at some point you lose the ability to have enough people to actually make money in the theater. So then it becomes, well, what do we have to do to make money? Well, most movie theaters are making their money off concessions and not necessarily the movie tickets. AMC has put in bars and other things like that in the theater, and that's a trend. I'm hoping they're gonna come up with more things like that to help keep themselves alive than they are gonna just kind of give up and say this isn't worth it anymore. I mean, at the same time, I don't know what those things that they're doing are going to be. You guys have any thoughts on just random ideas of what a movie theater could do?
Put everybody in their own little box, or little box for you and your group, your quarantine group. That makes sense. Yeah, they'll keep trying to come up with ways to get people to come in and give them money. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad I'm not in that business, but I'm also not in that business because I'm not interested in that business. So I'm sorry I haven't been thinking about that.
Interesting. Well, it's come to that time where Jonathan deserted us. And oh, wait, there he is. Jonathan, you don't get any final words. I'm sorry, we're done.
You know what? Okay, so my final word is, I think.
Wait, I said you don't get final words.
Right, but I can just do it. So yeah, I know my sorry, my internet connection got very poor.
It looks like it died again.
Yeah, the internet today. Mine's not doing so hot either. Sorry, friends.
But his is
Got
really
very
not
poor.
good. Oh, there he is. All right, Jonathan, what's your final word? I'll let you have it.
No, I think it was,
I don't know what we were talking about. I can't even. What? You trying to talk to me? This internet thing is ticking me off. All right. I don't know. Theaters.
theaters are going the way of Jonathan.
We can go virtual. We can do movies on TVs. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Tears
all right, Jonathan.
Tears going
the
away
internet
with me.
doesn't want you to have your final word.
Oh well.
I will say, okay, so one thing that I would like to say is that before all this happened, there were a bunch of movies that I was so interested in seeing, and I was actually thankful to be able to watch one of the movies that I mentioned to you all that I was interested in seeing, and that was the movie My Spy. Like, it was that movie that I even told you, hey, I'm looking forward to this just because I need something lighthearted and fun. And that's exactly what it was. And so I'm glad that the studios finally decided to release this movie on streaming services so that we could have something to enjoy during this time. It's been interesting seeing some of those movies kind of come to streaming services, and I appreciate the fact that it's happening. And at the same time, it does make me a little scared that we are going to lose the movie theater because of it. So, with that being said, Luke, now that Jonathan's just disappeared on us, do you have any suggestions? What maybe let's go with this. What's your favorite movie that you saw in a theater experience?
Wow. That's an interesting question because I guess, like, of my top 5 films, there's only one that I saw in the theater. And that was Matrix. So there you go. Of my top 5 films, Matrix is the only one that I saw in the theater.
Interesting. I mean, that's definitely a great movie to watch in the theater. And I was very thankful to be able that they re-released it not that long ago. And I got to see it in the Dolby Theater, which was delightful. And yeah, that was a fun experience for me.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because this whole discussion about theaters, and I'm now thinking about like all these great movies that I enjoy, none of which I saw in the theater. Maybe that's tainting, coloring, changing some of my view on all this.
Possibly. Jonathan, our recommendation, if you can get it in before your internet dies on you again, is the favorite movie that you had a movie going theater experience with. Luke has already pointed out that of his top 5, the only one he saw in the theater was The Matrix. Nope, he froze again. So I'm going to put something else out there. There's so many like movies that become like cult classics where the movie going experience becomes so much better. So I'm remembering a movie that I actually did see in the theater when I was back in college, Moulin Rouge, which I think is a delightfully fun movie and one that I still enjoy watching today, and has become a movie where it gets showed somewhat regularly in certain theaters with people actually singing along. And I think that create like we talked about creating that experience, that might be one of the things that actually saves movies. So I'm going to recommend that you take the opportunity, and if you are okay with the content of what Moulin Rouge is, go out and give it a watch. And thank you for joining us this episode. We hope that we will come up with something interesting to tell you again next time.
And that internet will work better, because it's a bummer when it doesn't, because we
Yeah.
use that to watch our movies.
And this is where you insert Jonathan's creative, witty line.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.